I never actually decide to stop creating content. I just postpone one video because I'm tired. I avoid it for another day because it now feels kind of overdue, and then look up several months later to discover that I accidentally disappeared again completely. That's the pattern I have repeated for years. And the strangest part is that I never stop wanting to create content. I still have ideas while I'm gone, and I still imagine how I would structure a video. I save topics that I might want to discuss later on, and I notice moments in games or books in everyday life that could become content. I continue watching other creators and thinking about what I would do differently in their place. But none of that becomes an actual upload. The creative part of my brain remains active, while the practical part apparently just freezes. And because I never make a conscious decision to quit, I also never create a clear moment when I'm supposed to start up again. I kind of just exist in this vague state of being someone who makes content, except for the minor detail that I'm not currently making any content. Whenever I do return, I rarely return quietly. I don't sit down and make one simple video to remind myself how the process works. I always develop this entire strategy. I start thinking about edited YouTube videos, I start thinking about TikTok, I start thinking about short clips and all the platforms all at the same time. Because for me, one account is not enough pressure when I could fall behind on 4 of them at the same time. I plan formats, I plan out upload days, I plan out visual styles of how I want something to look, and I plan out all the ways that this phase will be more organized than the last one. For a while, that energy works. I write a couple of scripts, I record footage, and I begin editing with the confidence of someone who has clearly solved the whole content creation thing. The channel, I imagine, is active and consistent, and every new idea feels like another piece of it falling into place. Those early stages are usually enjoyable. When I return after a long absence, everything feels fresh. I have months and months of ideas, and I'm no longer staring at an empty content calendar, wondering what to do next. I have way too much to say, and I don't have enough time to say it all, which at the beginning, of course, feels like a great problem to have. I can picture all the finished videos before I even make them, and I can imagine all the conversations those videos might start. At that point, I'm partly creating because I enjoy the video in front of me, and partly because I'm excited about the future versions of the channel those videos might create. Each upload feels important because it could be the beginning of something bigger. Eventually, however, the return stops feeling new and content creation has to fit into the rest of my life. I work full-time, so I wake up early and I spend a significant part of every day commuting, which means the person who comes home in the afternoon after 8 hours of work doesn't always have the same energy that the ambitious person that wrote out the content plan had. Sometimes I want to create after work, and sometimes I want to do something that does not require me to make hundreds and thousands of tiny decisions. Writing, filming, and editing are all creative, but they are creative in different ways. And switching between them after spending the day working can feel surprisingly difficult. An idea might still interest me, but interest alone doesn't automatically provide the concentration required to shape it into a finished video. Editing is usually the stage where this becomes overwhelming. Before I begin, the video seems fairly straightforward. I have a script, I know what I want to say, and I may already have a bit of footage. Then I open the timeline and I remember that every minute needs to be assembled manually. The voiceover needs cleaning, the visuals need support, everything needs to be cohesive, the pacing needs attention, and everything that feels repetitive kind of has to be removed. After that, there are captions, music, audio levels, a thumbnail, a title, all the little details the viewers aren't supposed to notice because ideally they simply make the video feel natural. When I have enough energy, I enjoy solving those problems. But when I don't, the project begins to feel much larger than the idea that created it. That is often when I miss the first upload. It might be because work was exhausting, or the edit took way longer than I expected it to, or I watched the same section so many times that I couldn't tell anymore whether it was interesting or whether I was being really boring. Sometimes the video is nearly finished, but then I become self-conscious about posting it. Sometimes I start noticing every awkward sentence and wondering whether the argument is obvious or my voice sounds strange, or if anyone will even care about the topic I'm speaking about. Now, none of those doubts necessarily mean the video is bad, but they do become very persuasive when the alternative is simply waiting another day. So I'll wait. I tell myself that I'll look at it again when I'm rested and capable of judging it properly. But once that upload is missed, the project kind of changes inside my head. It's no longer just a video I'm working on, it is the reason that my schedule is failed. Opening the edit means confronting the fact that I didn't do what I planned, so avoiding it gives me a bit of relief. Unfortunately, that relief makes the next attempt even harder. One missed upload becomes two, and the gap itself starts to feel more visible than anything I could post. I imagine that returning requires an explanation of some sorts, even though most viewers probably haven't been monitoring my absence with the level of attention that I assign to it. The longer I wait, the more pressure I place on the next video, because after being gone for months, returning with something merely decent kind of feels insufficient. The comeback should justify the disappearance in my head, prove that I have improved and established that this time will be different. While all of this is happening, I continue consuming other people's content. In fact, I often watch more of it while I'm not creating. I love long analytical videos and reviews, so it's really easy to spend the time I could have used working on my own project watching someone else complete theirs. This still feels connected to creating because I'm paying attention to structure and pacing and presentation. I notice strong introductions, interesting transitions, and editing choices I might want to try. Sometimes, yeah, sure, that might be genuinely useful, but it can also become a way of remaining close to content creation without taking any of its risks. Watching a finished video is comfortable. Making one requires me to produce the unfinished, clumsy version first and trust that I will gradually improve it. That comparison is also completely unfair, although that doesn't seem to stop me from making it. I compare someone else's final upload to my raw recording and like their clearest arguments to my earliest draft, and their years and years of experience to the project I have been avoiding for a few weeks. I don't see the sentences they removed or the sections they rewrote or the hours when the edit looked terrible. I only see the polished result that appears inevitable. Then I turn back to my own timeline where nothing feels inevitable because every improvement still depends on me making it. The content that at the beginning inspires me can at that point make returning more intimidating. My standards rise, but my practical experience remains exactly where I left it. If you're new here, I'm Sleepless. I make videos about gaming and fantasy books, and whatever subject has occupied enough of my brain to become an essay. And I have a long history of loving content creation while repeatedly vanishing from it. I'm trying to understand that pattern without pretending I've discovered like a perfect solution, because if elaborate plans alone could fix this, I would have been consistent years ago. I've made a lot of plans. The planning department is extremely productive. It's the publishing department that occasionally disappears without notice. What eventually brings me back is usually that I begin to miss having an audience. And I don't mean that in like an enormous view count or constant attention. I miss the exchange that happens after something is posted. A thought that for some time existed privately in my own head, at that moment becomes a conversation, and people respond with experiences or interpretations I myself couldn't have created alone. Someone may understand exactly what I meant, disagree with the entire argument, or recommend something that sends me into a new obsession. Even a small audience changes the experience of having an idea because the idea is no longer just with me. After enough time away, I begin to miss that feeling more more than I fear returning. And that's also what makes disappearing complicated. Publishing content involves being seen, and being seen is both the reward and the frightening part. While a video is unfinished, I can imagine that it has some sort of potential. But once I upload it, the potential becomes something measurable and imperfect. People can watch it or they can ignore it. I will always understand my point. The version in my head can remain flawless because nobody else has access to it. But the real version must survive outside of my control. When I become self-conscious, leaving the video unfinished allows me to protect that idea from the uncertainty, although it also guarantees that that idea never reaches anyone. I would genuinely like to know whether other people experience the same transition where one missed deadline somehow becomes like an unofficial retirement. The danger is that when I finally feel ready to return, I often create the exact conditions that made me disappear. I miss creating, become excited, and I immediately decide that one video is not enough. The YouTube essay should also produce several short clips, and those clips should appear on multiple platforms like TikTok and YouTube Shorts and on Instagram, and each platform should probably have a slightly different version because I know enough about content strategy to make my own hobby exhausting. I begin with one subject I care about, and I surround it with so many additional tasks that the idea becomes difficult to reach. Instead of allowing the first video back to be a single finished piece, I make it responsible for launching an entire era. There is something emotionally satisfying about calling every return a fresh start. A fresh start means I don't have to continue from the messy place where I stopped. I can redesign everything, I can choose a new schedule, I can imagine that the previous problems belong to someone else or some older version of myself. What I avoid in that process is the much less exciting act of resuming instead of starting. It doesn't provide the fantasy of becoming a completely different creator. It just asks me to continue being the creator I already was. I think learning to resume may be more important for me than learning to start. Starting has never really been the main problem. I can become intensely committed to a new project, and I can create enough momentum to convince myself that the pattern has changed. But a channel can't only be built during periods when I have unusually high motivation. There will always be a difficult edit or an exhausting week or a video that makes me doubt whether I should post it. If every interruption requires me to wait until I feel ready for another big return, then the absences will always become much longer than the event that causes them. That doesn't mean I need to force myself to create no matter how I feel. Some weeks genuinely I just don't have enough energy for it, and pretending otherwise will only make the process more resentful. What I need is a way to distinguish taking a break from disappearing. A break can be acknowledged without becoming a statement about who I am. I can have a week when I don't edit and I still remain someone that is working on a video. I can post later than planned without treating the entire plan as non-existent or invalid. But most importantly, I can return with an ordinary upload instead of waiting until I've made something impressive enough to compensate for being gone for so long. Maybe it can also help to accept that not every idea needs to be the most complicated version I can imagine. My instinct is always to prove that I care about a subject by giving the video more. So, more editing, more examples, more visuals, more time. But effort is not always visible in the way that I expect it to be, and complexity doesn't guarantee that the final video will communicate the idea more effectively. Sometimes adding more is part of the creative process, and sometimes it's a delay disguised as ambition. If I keep expanding a project because finishing it would require me to post it, then the extra work is not improving my video. It's protecting me from the video becoming real. I'm beginning to slowly understand that disappearing is not one decision. It's just a series of small acts I do where I avoid things that feel harmless on their own. I postpone an edit, or I avoid opening the project. I watch another video instead, and I decide that my return needs a better idea and I wait for a day when I will feel completely confident in my content. None of those choices really feel like quitting, but together they create the same result. Months later, I look back and I wonder why I stopped doing something I still cared about. I would like this return to be different, although saying that already sounds suspiciously like the beginning of my usual cycle. So I'm not gonna claim that I have finally become perfectly consistent, or I won't promise that nothing will interrupt me this time. I work full time, my energy changes, and some videos will take longer than I expect. I'll probably miss uploads, or I'll question my work and just spend way too much time watching someone else's essays instead of editing my own. The change I actually want is smaller. When that happens, I want to recognize it as an interruption rather than an ending. I want to stop treating a quiet week as proof that I failed, and I want to stop asking every new video to repair every video I didn't make. I want to finish more of the ideas that matter to me, even when the final result can't match the perfect version I imagined before beginning. Maybe I'll always be someone who just occasionally disappears from content creation, but I don't have to remain gone until I can invent a completely new version of myself. I can just open the project again, continue where I stopped, and then press upload.